How are you doing today?
I'm doing swell, no complaints. How are you?
I'm good. Well, firstly, I want to congratulate you on winning the Dorian Award for Best Current Affairs show. How do
Thank
you
you.
feel about that?
Thank you. I am so honored to be. I feel like in such great company. So thank you for taking the time and thank you for giving me this award. It's such a pleasure, honestly.
Amazing. Did you receive it yet in the mail?
No, but I'm not home currently. I'm away
Okay.
writing a book. I go back this weekend, so hopefully I can't wait to see it.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, so we have 15 minutes. I have a
Mhm.
couple of questions for you, so we'll just like breeze right through. You know, nothing too strict. So, firstly, I'm the president of the Dorian Awards, and I'm also the editor in chief for CineSpeak in Philadelphia, which is a nonprofit concerning social justice in cinema. So, it's actually a big honor to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Um, and one of my first questions for you, as a comedian and a writer, who inspired you in your earlier days, like before you became Ziwe and having your own show on Showtime? Like, who was your major inspiration to like, bring your ideas and your work and your ideologies to the masses?
Sure. I think my single greatest inspiration was honestly Toni Morrison. I read the book Sula. I read the book Sula when I was a freshman in high school, and that was the first time I ever sort of considered like this black woman's perspective. It's about matriarchal societies, and it really was about sort of this anti-hero in Sula who was like giving and sort of messianic but also taking from the people in her sphere. And so I just thought that that was such a like eye-opening book, and that really prompted me to become a professional writer. I thought with Toni Morrison, who became a writer in her well into her 40s after having several children, and sort of like coming to that voice later in life, it was really such an inspiration in terms of just really accepting that like my perspective was valuable and worth being shared.
Hmm. Awesome. And in that regard, as far as creative control in your show and like your work, how important is that to you, as far as like it being released to your audience?
Sure. I think that creative control is super important, especially to my eponymous show. But it is also a collaborative effort. I would not be here without my wonderful producers and writers and set decorators and vocalists. And there are so many people who contribute to the show and make the show what it is. So while I have control in terms of what I want to talk about and the perspective, it is constantly me being in communication with all of the many talented people on that show.
Gotcha. And do you feel that there are limitations and expectations to your work, or do you just like take it all in and just decide, like, this is what feels right and I'm going to go ahead and do it, like, consequences be damned?
Do I feel like there are limitations to my work? That's a complicated question because there's limitations to humanity. I can't fly. I can't I can't eat wasps. But my imagination is expansive constantly, and I'm constantly learning and growing. So while I'm limited by my mortal coil, I hope to sort of express myself in all the ways that I possibly can. And I think you see that in the show, which does music and field pieces and writing, and it's comedic, but it's also really thoughtful and sincere. So we're constantly blending what should be on television. And I think that the show is a testament to this collaborative effort that we are using to expand what variety show means.
Mhm. And so do you find catharsis in like some of the topics that you talk about, especially like when you're interviewing certain guests and you like choose the questions for the specific guests? Like, do you find like it's a form of therapy for you to work through some of the social issues that you touch on?
Entirely. I mean, all, my art is cathartic for me. I kind of say selfishly that I create for myself, and then hopefully other people enjoy it because this is how I promise trauma is through laughter, and so that's why the beginning of Baited and then the Z-Way show and the Instagram live, all of these things feel so organic because they really start at my core. So definitely, yeah, definitely.
Right. And some of the topics that you talk about, like before the internet existed and before like Instagram Live existed, a lot of the material that you talk about was only accessible through academia. So do you find that you are committed to making these ideas and like history about like Black people and like the history of the Black diaspora, like within this country, do you feel like you're making it more accessible to people who may not have the means of accessing that type of knowledge or these types of
Monica,
perspectives?
I love that question. Absolutely. I was lucky enough to go to college, and I studied African American studies, and that was really one of the first times I was sort of encountering this like troubled history of the Black American experience in the United States. And so I don't think that you should have to spend $200,000 to understand like basic American history. And so my goal is to make all of these lessons that I learned at my very expensive schools sort of accessible to the public, but also palatable, right? Because no one wants to be taught and learned and preached at. So I think of it as like your medicine with sugar, right? So you're giving them something really thoughtful, but it's disguised. It's an illusion of humor and jokes because that's how I process information is through comedy. Honestly, I'm someone who likes to passively learn, so I watch a lot of documentaries, and so I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for people to just like watch my show and think, and watch my show and laugh, because those two things work in tandem.
Word. Thank you for that. That was a great answer.
Thank you.
I also majored in African American studies, and when I went to university, I was like, I knew that something was going on, but now you just solidified it, and I have to get into debt to realize that everything that
Yeah,
I'm going through.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? So
Also,
kudos to you.
no, I totally feel that because I also went to college. I went to college, and it was Obama became president, and it was like, yes, we did it. We are succeeding. Everything is utopia. And then you start to realize, wait, okay, this illusion that we created was exactly that, an illusion. And so, really peeling back like the rose-colored glasses was very difficult, but essential to my growth. So I want to give that to other people.
Bless. Thank you for your work.
Oh
Super
goodness.
important.
Thank you for your
Ah,
work. This is
my
super
heart's just
important.
like pounding. I'm like, this is so cool.
Oh
Um,
goodness.
so we'll switch over to just some questions about your show. And I'm really curious to know which one of your guests exceeded your expectations?
Which one of my guests exceeded my expectations? All of
Mm-hmm.
my guests are my precious children. So it's hard to pick a favorite because they all have different functions. What you get from Gloria Steinem is wildly different from what you get from Andrew Yang, which is different from what you get from Stacey or Bowen Yang. So it's hard to pick a guest that sort of superseded anything that I thought. But I really appreciated the beauty standards episode because it was sort of a subversion of what qualified as beauty standards with two black women, Ebony K. Williams and Rachel Lindsay from the Real Housewives and The Bachelor, respectively. And so that was just such a really compelling conversation for me.
Right. And who would you like to have as a guest on your show? Like, who is like your super dream like guest?
I mean, Kim Kardashian is usually what I say, only because she is one of the most famous American women in history. And so to talk to her about race, I think would be a really beneficial conversation for all of us. But there are so many people I would love to converse with. Barack Obama, the Clintons, like the list goes on, Emrata. Yeah, there's so many people who I think could have a really compelling conversation on my show. And I think that's the fun of my show, right? It's infinitely refillable. I could talk to my conversation with Barack Obama would be so different than Bill Clinton, which would be so different than Emrata or Kim Kardashian. And each of those would offer something really unique and specific to the public that only my show could give.
Right. And the Dorian Society, we are the LGBT Critic Society of Entertainment Critics. So I'm curious to know, like, like Little Nas X is like very popular right now.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of discourse about blackness and sexuality and whatnot. And I'm just curious to know, what does solidarity look like with other genders and other people that are not necessarily heteronormative in your eyes?
I think it means two things most importantly. Firstly, giving these marginalized people the space to speak for themselves, right? Because it's not your job to say this is what these guys need, or women or gender nonconforming people need. That's not cool. And then conversely, if you have a platform, making sure you elevate those voices. So I think that those are really important. Those are really important things to me, and that's what I try to do on my show. I'm a huge fan of Lil Nas X. I met Lil Nas X like 2 years ago when they broke out for Old Town Road, and they were such a sweet, hardworking person. They were on Samaro, and so we got to like interact. And so I support what they're doing in terms of visibility, in terms of the music they're making, in terms of the visuals that they're providing. I just think are really, really compelling and really interesting. And so I hope that I can bring voices like that onto my show. Lil Nas X would be another iconic guest on my show. They have so many valuable things to say. And I'm hoping to address the themes of like gender and sexuality in season 2. So I guess you'll have to stay tuned. But it's something that's really, really quite compelling to me as, yes, as myself. Like I exist in this society. I'm marginalized, but I also have a lot of privilege. And how can I use my space to bring more people in? That's the goal.
That is totally real. Thank you. These are just a couple of questions. So I want to know, as far as television, and was television like a really big part of your life as far as like understanding like culture and like different
Yeah.
like perspectives? And if so, which television show stood out the most in your adolescence or in your, yeah.
I mean, but most of my parents worked, so I grew up watching television all the time, all the
Mhm.
time, all the time. When I wasn't like at after school programs, I was watching television. And so Kids WB and Disney Channel and all that stuff, Veggie Tales, everything. So if I'm speaking about what particular program influenced my life, that is sort of a really difficult conversation. I think
If
Oprah Winfrey is really impactful in my life, but more for her show, but more so for her as a figure, for the expectations that people ask of her, as well as what she's willing to give, as well as the sort of enterprise that she built with her magazine and with her favorite things and with her, yeah, I find her to be really quite interesting to be a Black woman in these spaces. I just find it really compelling and interesting. And I think that you see that reflected in my show, right? It sort of pays homage to like the Colberts of the world, as well as this senior Black correspondent of Oprah Winfrey, who sort of is the original influencer that we don't really discuss. So that was really impactful. But yeah, I mean, I consume so much. Like I watched Clueless as a kid, and so I was really moved by like the hyper femininity of it, as well as the idea that like Dion, the character with the braids, like she had braids, and I didn't know that was the first time I ever thought like, oh, it's cool to have braids. Like I shouldn't be embarrassed that my Nigerian parents are always trying to do my hair like that. And she was like accepted, and it wasn't really like, okay, this is the Black girl and this is why. She was just sort of like integrated into that group. I found that really interesting. But then most of all, okay, what else did I watch? Yeah, that was really compelling for me. But yeah, I mean, I am deeply influenced by media. I'm always consuming. I watched a lot of news as a kid. So ABC World News, I'd watch every day, the local world news. And this was from like '01 to maybe 2010 when I left home. And so that really impacted my perspective on the world and like what is objective and what's subjective. Yeah, I watched a lot of television. I watched a lot of television. Yeah. Watched a
Same.
lot of Real Housewives too.
That's my next question actually. So, and we have 3 minutes left. So,
It's cool. It's fine. I'm not in a rush.
okay. So, what's your overall mission, like as far as what are you trying to do with your show and like interviewing guests and like what's your overall mission, and also where do you see yourself like 2 years from now down the line? I always
Well,
like to ask that question because I like to envision and manifest things. So, sometimes when we speak about like the things that we want to do and it happens, you're like, oh, I actually made that happen. So just curious to know.
I am a supreme believer in manifestation, so I
Mhm.
concur. As far as where do I see myself in 2 years, I hope that I have more opportunities to give more people who have been overlooked in this industry opportunities to shine and write and perform and produce because they have these qualifications, but because of gatekeeping or what have you, they may not have the opportunities. So I hope that I can I hope that I can help other people grow in the way that others have helped me grow. And then what was your first question?
Um, I think your overall. Oops. Oh no, I cut out. Sorry, Zoom
I can still
issue.
hear you.
Yeah, it's just my tablet, my Zoom issue. There we go.
Mm.
So my question before that was, you modeled your interview style from Andy Cohen,
Yes.
and you also interviewed Ebony K. Williams. And I wanted to know, like, in the current season of The Real Housewives of New York City, do you like? She's been talking a lot about like Black issues and about
Yeah.
our history and things of that nature. And I'm curious to know, like, do you think that that's following in the same great, like, hold on, wait, let me reframe this question. In your history of watching The Real Housewives, do you think that this is like the most progressive that you've seen the series, like as far as the work that Ebony K. Williams is doing on this season of Real Housewives in New York City?
I find the conversations that Ebony K. Williams is having on Real Housewives of New York to be very compelling. I'm really intrigued by this. And mind you, when I interviewed her, the show hadn't premiered. So I really had no sort of understanding of who she was other than the fact that I read her book.
Okay.
I'm interested. What I like to do is I love to rewatch Real Housewives episodes. So I'll rewatch an episode of like Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and they will be in Jamaica, and they'll be snorkeling, and there'll be no fish. All the fish will be dead. All the coral will be dead. And I'll think, oh wow, is this like the first indication of climate change? Who's to say? And so when I watch this Ebony K. Williams season, I'm really intrigued about how it ages in 5 years, and whether we look back on this time of like discourse about race as a period of growth or as a period of resistance. And so I don't know what's to come with that show, but I find it to be such a interesting indication of the state of our country, right? 2008 was around when Real Housewives of Orange County premiered, which was during the global recession. So you had this woman demonstrating this excessive wealth as like a lot of people lost their homes. And so the time capsule that it acts as is really sort of an indication of our society. So I find it really, really interesting, honestly.
That's so cool. Okay. Well, those are all of my questions. I want to
Sure.
thank you so much for your time and giving us the time and space to ask you all of these lovely things. And also, I can't wait for you to get your award.
Oh, thank you. I can't wait
Super,
too.
super happy for you.
This is my first award. I'm very thankful. I'm very
This is your
thankful.
first award?
Yeah, for my show. Yeah, you guys are my first award.
Ah!
So this is huge.
That is awesome. So we're ahead of the game in that. And I'm pretty sure there will be many, many, many more for you. I'm
Thank you.
so excited
Who's
for
to
you.
say? But I'm excited about this one.